Today we find out how it feels to be the eye in the sky.
We learn to stop worrying and love the weather bomb.
And we find out why this week neither one of us are wearing pants. All in the next half hour on The App Clinic. Today we're looking at weather apps, weather bomb, eye in the sky, and should I wear pants?
And then we're going to dig a little deeper into how weather bomb renders its awesome map.
So let's have a look at weather apps in general. What are the things that it really needs in order to be a good app?
Well, obviously it needs to tell me today's weather, right?
That seems like a pretty good start, right?
Because obviously I don't want to get out of bed or open the window.
Precisely. That would be too much to ask, right? You want to be able to know this stuff before you get out of bed. It would also be nice to know tomorrow's weather.
And the 7-day forecast, I would go for that.
Exactly. All the things which mean that you no longer are a slave to the 11 o'clock news.
Absolutely.
You also want to have results that are localized, right? Something which knows where you are to give you the weather forecast for, the city that you're in rather than the general state.
That's true, but I don't necessarily want it too local because really what I want to know is how cold or windy is it going to be at the beach this time?
That's true, which means you really want to be able to have multiple locations.
Can you tell we're in Northern California? Because I didn't say how hot and sunny is it going to be at the beach.
Yeah, and that's the thing, where we are here in sunny, sometimes, Northern California. It's an area of extreme microclimate, so the localization of the weather is really important, and the ability to know which direction you need to drive for it to get less foggy is kind of a killer feature.
Exactly.
If we're going to take things up a little further, what we really like to see is a lot of the stuff that you're used to seeing at the 11 o'clock news. Things like rich maps with sort of more meteorological information like topography charts, satellites, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and also I want to see maps when I'm choosing my location.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That way you don't have to know what city the beach is in. You just point at the beach, job done.
Oh yeah, anytime I can get away from putting in text to my mobile phone, excellent. But I don't just want that because I'm super lazy. I also want widgets. I want to be able to see the weather immediately when I unlock my phone.
In fact, I want to go a step further and say maybe there's a case here for some rich notifications, something which tells, has a little sun or cloud or whatever else. And it's a really good example of where you might want to use a low priority notification. So it doesn't pop up, it doesn't ping me, but when I pull down the slide, I've got that extra information handy.
Although I didn't mind knowing what the temperature is at all times
in
my notification bar. I thought that was kind of a cool feature. But of course, none of this is going to be any good if your battery runs down all the time. And so we're going to go ahead and beat this dead horse one more time. All of these things depend on efficient background updates that are done in a way that won't drain your battery.
And this is actually another really good tip here, is that if you do want to do your updates, say that you know that the new weather forecast comes in once a day, so you want to wake up the phone at 2 a.m. every morning to get that new fresh weather forecast each day, make sure that you're not doing that at an exact time. Because what you'll find is if everyone else is doing the right thing and saying, look, we're not going to start anything unless someone turns on the phone to do this update, you know you have to do it then, suddenly you turn on not just one user's device, but everyone who has your app installed at the same time, and then floods the bandwidth with everyone else's updates as well. So you want to make sure that you're making that as fuzzy as possible. 2 a.m.-ish, plus or minus an hour, so that you give your service a chance to not get flooded, as well as the mobile phone operator's bandwidth.
If only there were an API that would do that for me.
Indeed, something like a inexact repeating alarm, perhaps.
Really? I'll have to keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and take a look at our apps.
Indeed. So you can see the icons on the bottom. We're going to start with Weather Bomb.
Bomb diddy bomb diddy bomb diddy dom diddy. Okay, sorry.
So you can see the feature page here. It is a riot of color, which is aptly depicted in their app icon, which is in fact a 4-color logo of raindrops, I suppose. Slightly concerning, the concept of there being 4-colored raindrops, but nonetheless, it is consistent with their overall UI or branding, I suppose, which I guess is multicolor. And I guess that's kind of their killer feature, is the fact that they've got these multiple overlays over the top of them map views, which show all of these rich colors.
Yeah, absolutely.
That said, the actual feature graphic itself, again, is falling into that trap of looking a little bit amateurish. This is not an amateur app. This has been really well put together. But you look here and it just feels a little bit like the bits are pulled together. And
yeah, it hasn't gotten within a few miles of a professional graphic artist, I think. At least not the layout. Each little bit looks really nice.
Exactly. So it's the composition here that I think could use a lot of work. You want to avoid things like italicized serifed fonts within the feature graphic, because again, as things get smaller and smaller, they're going to be harder to read. In fact, even from just a few feet away, I'm getting the impression that I may need to either clean my glasses or update my prescription, because I can barely read insightful weather there.
This is something that a lot of people get wrong, don't even realize until you see it on a small device. If your logo, if the app name in your logo is not at least twice as big as what WeatherBomb has, you're not going to be visible on a lot of devices. You're not going to sell.
Exactly. And you want to avoid duplicating things. It is always a question of whether you put the app's title and catchline in the feature graphic. There is certainly an argument for that, but in this case, it's not really adding anything to the aesthetic. Similarly, you don't want to put the app icon into the feature graphic. You've already got the multicolored raindrops, which is that branding effect, but you want to avoid actually just duplicating content, because as you can see here, you're just sort of seeing the same thing repeated over and over again. It just feels like things are cut and pasted and left.
Also, I wouldn't mind a slightly different treatment on the icon itself.
Oh, it's the
it
rounded
looks a
corners.
little familiar. Not just the rounded corners, but that the little swash of color, like a reflection across the top.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I've seen that before, and it wasn't on Android.
Yeah, it's an interesting opportunity here, because again, what we're looking for is a unique silhouette, something which really stands out and looks great. So there's some sort of treatment here that just removes the box as a first step and just has the four raindrops. Will be an interesting place to start.
Absolutely.
So let's move on. Let's have a look at the app itself. So we're going to bring up the giant phone.
Giant phone. There we go. All right, let's pull the app up. Now, there's a EULA at the beginning, which is unsurprising, and then there is a page of text which it took me quite some time to get past it and to understand not just to read it, but to actually figure out how to dismiss it.
So it's like you're looking here and it's like, okay, so this is the wizard. Where's the OK button? How do I move
we're
on to
going to
the
do a
next
huge
part?
favor for all of our viewers and show you how to get to the second page of this WeatherBomb app, and that is to hit the refresh button, which shouldn't be there anyway.
Yeah, and it's an interesting implementation here. They actually had a countdown built into the refresh button, which is interesting. But really, we're trying to get to a point now with app design where we can sort of banish the refresh button. A lot of users are still going to want it there, particularly for things like weather or email, where they're like, seriously, I want to have up to the second. But that's a good thing to put in something like an overflow menu so that it is there for people who want it, but ideally, no one does. Everything just refreshes and does everything for you. In an app like this, there is that EULA at the beginning, which is going to take some time for someone to at least look at and dismiss, if not read through. That's a great time to do that pre-caching. It only took a few seconds to bring that first page of information. When someone downloads and opens your app for the first time, if they hit the icon, bypass the EULA, and this is the first thing that they see, this is pretty compelling.
It really is.
Compared to a page full of text with big bright red on black text right at the start. It's something you want to get to the awesomeness of your app as quickly as possible, and this looks awesome. The previous page looked, again, a little amateurish.
Yeah, I don't know if the author of this app is running analytics, but it'd be fascinating to see just how much abandonment there is of the first page. I know I probably wouldn't have gone through with it if it wasn't my job to do so, which is not a ringing endorsement. The app itself did reward my patience richly.
And this looks really nice. We were talking about the nice to have. I mean, they've got a map here at the start, and it seems if I drag left or right, it's going to go through the time and show this real-time map of satellite. I guess it's rainfall coverage. That would make more sense.
I think you can actually pick some different.
Oh, nice.
That was rain. We've got wind, which is always nice to know in this area.
Unsurprising.
Yeah. Now, the only thing that bugged me about this map actually was that I had to pinch to zoom on a reasonably small area. In this case, where I know exactly where I want to zoom to, I really prefer the double tap to zoom, and it doesn't support that. I wasn't sure why.
So this looks like, I wonder if this is the the Android map library that they've used here, if they've got something custom that they've built themselves.
Actually, we'll see later that it is not the Android map library.
You've done some investigation. Excellent. All right, well, we'll look into that. But certainly the functionality here is fantastic. It is a very busy screen, which is worth noting. And in fact, the killer feature here is really this map, which is front and center. But once you have the notes on the bottom and the various stuff on top, we've got a lot of content
you
here.
can dismiss the note, but yeah, I agree completely that you've got some real problems crowding the screen. And some of these things, are sort of nice to have. Like maybe you really do want us to have the graph, but the graph is redundant. The graph up here is really redundant with
you've got that
with the time map. So it seems like you could have one or the other.
Exactly,
or
at
maybe
least
just give you an option to view it or not.
Exactly, some way to swipe to dismiss or to collapse or something like that, so that you can really enjoy, this, really engaging, interaction model.
Yeah. I was happy that it's very easy to drop down and pick locations, but it's relatively difficult to add new locations. I was really hoping that I could just do something with this map to add a location. Instead, it was a little harder.
Okay.
I've got to go to this other page, and then I've got to hit plus, and then I've got to do a lat long. Now I think I don't know how to get to a map.
I don't think you can. I think you can search for places, but you can't pick off a map, and that would be a really interesting, view to just allow you to just go straight off the map.
Yeah, certainly anytime you have a lat long, you should be able to do a map. It's kind of like having a date. You want to also have a calendar picker, I think.
Now, so this is interesting as well. You'll note that every time, now that we've added a new location, we get that same startup screen again. So again, really here, we don't need the extra instruction. You should really be initiating that sync as soon as I add the new place on the expectation that I'm going to switch to it at some point.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a really nicely polished app. Again, you may be underplaying some of the data. It's really a question here of what do you want to emphasize? What is the main thing you want users to take away from here? Because we have the temperature, but it's in light gray, and it's absolutely tiny up the top left here, which is arguably one of the more important things that you're going to want to share with users. So again, just take that into consideration. What are people going to want? What are they going to want to do, and make it as easy as possible?
Now, of course, Weatherbomb's still in beta, and the author has mentioned that he's got a lot of plans to add different things. So I think that why don't we just ignore some of the basic layout issues and focus on the fact that the map is a really cool feature.
Definitely.
We're going to talk about it a little bit later, cover it in more detail. For now, why don't we go ahead and move on to Eye in the Sky?
Okay, let's do that. So yeah, nicely done. Great to hear that it's in beta. Definitely a promising app. So yeah, let's have a look at Eye in the Sky. So this is the Eye in Sky feature page. Now this is actually quite good.
It's not bad.
It's got a distinctive logo. It's kind of an eye type look. It would be kind of creepy if it was a real eye. So I think I like the fact that it's stylized, and it's in the sky, which is nice. Yeah. Almost want to question whether you want to call it Eye in Sky or Eye in the Sky.
I've been calling it Eye in the Sky all day long.
As have I, which seems like a small thing.
And I've been singing that Alan Parsons Project song, which nobody but me remembers.
That's because you are old. Old.
Apparently so.
Now, the danger in having a name which is similar to something which people are familiar with but actually not the same is that people are going to search for it using the name that they think it is. So a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Eye in the Sky, great, search for it, and that may not be the top result. It may be confused with something else. So we don't want to tell you to rename it.
When you become very popular, then your results will bubble up, and all of a sudden people searching for Eye in the Sky will get to your app instead. But that actually takes quite a long time and a lot of popularity, so wouldn't count on it.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that people are going to get what they're looking for, and I can see that you've actually changed the name to Eye in Sky Weather, which again is going to be helpful for people searching for weather. You want to be careful with over-optimizing your titles and those sorts of things, but at the very least you want to make sure that you can take advantage of that word-of-mouth type, discovery.
By the way, real quick point on the search algorithm. A lot of people complain during the first 3 or 4 days that their app is available that typing in the app's exact name won't actually bring that app into the first search results, sometimes not even in the top 10. And this is exactly why. It's because we do try to alter the user's search phrase or search on phrases that have resulted in successful searches in the past, right?
Yeah.
So there's a really, really fancy algorithm going on based on what we think is going to please the user the most, and it takes a little while to adjust.
So that's, I think the last comment we want to make here again, you'll see a lot of these sort of themes recurring as we go through a lot of these apps. But again, we've kind of got this squared off square icon, which all it does is bound this really distinctive and interesting silhouette. So again, I think you can get a lot further in terms of creating that really great app icon by just removing that background. Mm-hmm. So let's switch to the giant phone and have a look at Eye in the Sky. See, I've even written Eye in the Sky.
Yes.
I apologize for mislabeling your app.
Yes, well.
So again, we've got the release notes. Now, this is kind of a pet peeve of mine. I don't want to have to dismiss things, particularly because its release notes here strongly suggest that if I get an update at some point after I've got this installed, this is going to come up again and again. For most users, you can display this information on Google Play. Otherwise, users don't care. They assume that you're going to fix bugs and those sorts of things. If they're really interested to see if a specific bug has been fixed, they can do that on the Google Play listing. Within the app itself, you want to make sure they can get from hitting the button to using the app with as few steps as possible.
See, I'm not with you on that, Reto.
Yeah?
I actually have a different opinion. One of my favorite apps, G-Reader Pro, updates maybe once a month, and I really enjoy having their release notes pop up.
Okay.
I have my Google Play set to auto update, so I never realize when something's getting updated. And of course, I don't want to be bothered for minor bug fixes, but a lot of times they'll put in a really cool new feature, and I wouldn't know whether to try that feature. I wouldn't know how to try that feature.
Well,
if they
perhaps that's the key. It's that compromise of making sure that you only display it if there are significant fixes, or significant new features that people may want to take advantage of.
Exactly, and certainly displaying on the first time to launch the app seems a little odd.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Well, you've had to
lazy
install
maybe.
it. Yeah, you've had to install it at some point
Yeah.
from somewhere, so likely it is you know what the app currently does. The app itself looks really nice. I really quite like the minimalist approach here. They've got a nice view pager implementation for being able to switch between the current temperature, 48-hour detailed view, and long-range forecast, which is nice. Again, you can have multiple locations. Again here, there's no obvious way to add locations. I'm looking for a plus button here. So to make it really easy to be able to.
You know what I would also accept is a magnifying glass here, because
that
tells me, whatever is in the area up here at the top of the screen is probably what that search is going to do.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think this places icon will actually take you.
It does the same thing, and it takes us to basically what we were expecting. So the ability to add manually, and I'm guessing this is going to take you to your map. Now, we don't have the correct version of Google Play Services installed here because it's a specially flashed device, but nonetheless, that will take you to the map and give you exactly what you're hoping for.
Yeah, so a few more button presses than I would have hoped, and also a little bit more tricky than I would have hoped. I saw that plus button and instinctively pressed it, and then was disappointed that there was no map, but then I saw the map button. Oh, that's how you do it.
Exactly.
Could be a little more intuitive.
Otherwise, it's really nice and simple, and I think that's the main takeaway here. It's immediately obvious. All of the key information is right there on the page when you first start up the app, and everything else is just a swipe away. There's no refresh on the main screen, but it is hidden away here in the overflow menu if you desperately want to know whether the weather has changed significantly in the last 30 seconds.
Now, one of the things that this app really wins at is widgets. They have several different widgets.
Nice.
And I really enjoyed their widget setup process. I have a couple beefs with it, but in general, I think that they've provided the widgets that I wanted. Let's just scroll over to that. So, Iron Sky Forecast. That's a good one. Yeah. Yes. And when I place it, I get this widget configuration, which shows me the widget against my wallpaper, so exactly how it's going to appear. And that's great because, on my personal phone, I've got a photo of my family, and
of course,
it can be really difficult to get a wallpaper that looks good and widgets that look good with that. Now, one thing I love about this is that I can set the transparency on the widget and then see a preview of it.
That's very tidy.
And my only quibble is I would love for that to not be a dialogue so that I could see the preview at the same time that I'm picking the transparency instead of right after.
Yeah.
Minor point.
Yeah.
It would make a
It's
big
a quibble,
difference,
but
honestly.
it would definitely make a big difference. That's a really nice feature.
And, sorry, one more. Except I don't know how to get back to their widget configuration.
It's generally not an easy thing to do. I think you'll find you probably have to add a new one.
Yes, well,
per widget.
I will simply mention that they also have, I think, 9 or 10 different skins that you can put on the widget, going from the sort of minimalist look here all the way up to photorealistic clouds and sunshine. In fact, not just sunshine, but an actual from space photo of the sun, which looks a little bit frightening.
That's kind of nice. And they've even got the rich notifications here as well, which do in fact show you the the current temperature up on the status bar. It's probably a little bit too small to see.
It is. You can adjust what it shows, but I love having the temperature there because it makes me feel like I'm in my luxury automobile.
Nice.
Yeah.
So we should move on. We spent a lot of time on the first app already, so we're running out of time. But we'll just make a quick note of the fact that they have this ability to upgrade to Pro to remove ads and support development. On the bottom, it's actually quite a nice treatment. It follows with the general design aesthetic here, so it doesn't feel too aggressive. And if we follow that through, it goes to Google Play to allow you to buy a key. So they've used a key approach here. One alternative, which might be a little bit less intrusive for users, is to use in-app billing to do an upgrade that way.
I really prefer that, and I'll tell you why. Because the in-app billing will follow the user's account. You don't have to have 2 apps. The one thing that's nice about having a pro version and a free version is that the free version can ask for the permissions necessary for ad networks, and you don't have to add that to the pro version. But I feel like the key policy here is the worst of both worlds. The original app has to ask for all of the permissions that the free version needs, and yet it isn't as easy to purchase as an in-app purchase would be.
Exactly. So that may be something worth looking at. We have in-app billing version 3 now available, which makes it a lot simpler than previous versions. So it's definitely something you want to investigate to help your monetization efforts. Last app we want to look at, we want to give Ian a chance to give us some more deep dive information on that map view. But before we do, possibly one of my favorite apps from today, should I wear pants today?
See, and I looked at this and I thought, wow, this has to be a British app. And then I remembered that no, in Britain, pants means something different.
Exactly.
But what about Australia?
That would be a very different app.
I know you call football soccer and soccer football.
No, we use the American
soccer.
Pants. Yeah, well, and
you
soccer.
Say so pants and soccer are the same in Australia as they are in America.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like in both countries. It's in all countries, it's inappropriate to play soccer in just your pants, but nonetheless. We have a look at the feature graphic. It's actually pretty nice. I'm not sure that it quite works as an icon. It gets a little bit too crowded.
Yes.
You want to take that same idea and perhaps stylize it a little so that you've got a pair of pants or trousers, as they like to say in the UK, with a question mark, but actually having that photorealistic image of the cut-off cargos doesn't work quite so well when you get down to
photorealism doesn't really work on icons as
exactly.
well.
Works great on the feature graphic, but maybe want to reconsider on the icon.
You know what?
side.
Adobe Illustrator can vectorize that for you in a heartbeat. So.
Boom. Very nice.
Yeah.
I do like the fact that they haven't stuck it on a square, rounded background.
Thank God
so
for
thank
that,
you for
yeah.
that. We'll switch to the giant phone, and we'll fire up the app. And again, they've actually got it's a really nice, really straightforward UI, which just looks up what the current temperature is and suggests what you should wear.
And it looks like today, Reto, you will be wearing a blouse and a pair of hot pants.
That's right. So Friday.
Yep.
You're able to scroll through here and see what you want to wear today, tomorrow. Now, we are in Northern California, so it is basically going to be the exact same thing between now and, I'm going to say, April of next year.
Pretty
hard
much,
to
yeah.
say. But it's actually really nice. It still does give you the temperature and your current location at the bottom so that you can confirm whether or not this is the stuff that you want.
Well, and it does have the very important flip-flop report.
Yes.
Can you wear flip-flops today?
This is
I
what
don't know.
this
Did
is
it
what
rain last night?
this is what people are asking. Now, most of the magic actually happens within the preferences. Now, the good news here is that it does default to things which are reasonably sensible. So you start up the app straight away, and you get what it does. You either find it amusing and kind of cool, or you're like, yeah, maybe not. But here you get to go through and really add all of this customization. So you can basically set at what temperature your cutoff is to be able to wear cutoffs, so on and so forth. You can select your gender, you can select your temperature units, you can choose to add a little bit of swagger to your look, sunglasses at night if that's your thing, and all of this sort of stuff then just goes through to
it's
modify.
really 80s pop song day today, isn't it?
It kind of is, yeah. We're showing our age, but nonetheless. So we really like this. I think this is really clever. This is one of those apps which I think of as being a little bit magic in that it does something which brings a smile to your face. It elicits that response where you're like, okay, that's kind of cool.
And really my only quibble is that the overall skin is so dark that I thought it was disabled. And then I realized it's not disabled. It just apparently was drawn by the same guy that does the series of Unfortunate Events books.
So yeah, you may want to bump up your contrast just a little, add a little bit more color just so you can see what's going on. But I mean, these are real nitpicks. This is a really clever little app that's really imaginative. So nicely done.
It could be a widget.
It could be a widget. That's true.
It would
actually be a really good widget. Yeah, I like that. So with that in mind, we've got a few minutes left. Ian has some tips for drawing things in GL.
Yeah, well, I was intrigued by Weatherbomb's map, and I thought, wow, not only is it pretty, but it's also kind of fast. And so I decided to look into it a little more with GL Trace View. And I found some interesting things. Now, we don't have a ton of time, but I'm just going to look a little bit over what Weatherbomb does. Of course, this is Reto's time to move. Just be moved there. Okay, there we go. All right. We try and we try. Okay. Now, when you open up GL Trace View on this app, the first thing you're going to see is this frame over here that's actually everything but the map. And the reason is that the frame is being drawn in a GL Surface View. And the way this works is there is a windowing system in Android, just like there is in any other modern operating system. You don't really use it very often because everything's done with activities. But in this case, what we have is a view here that's going to actually get a hole punched in it. In other words, part of it's going to be transparent and there's going to be a window underneath it, which is actually showing the map. Now, this area here is being drawn in a second context. So it's important to set your context right up here. Whoa, there we go. Little button there. And so that's context 1. And let's see how they draw the map. So the first draw call just draws the map, and you can see it's about 6 triangles. I don't even know why it's 6. Could be 2. Next thing that's going to get drawn is the actual map. Now, this is what, or I'm sorry, the actual overlay. This is what made me intrigued, because if you look at some of these, you can see that there's some interesting artifacts that are basically coming out of the process of coloring this. And if you've worked much with GL, you probably know exactly what's going on already. What's going on is the author has overlaid a fine mesh over the top of this texture that contains the map, and then used vertex coloring on each piece of that mesh. Each vertex is actually using a lookup to find, now vertex coloring actually is slightly wrong. We're doing a per vertex text chord into this essentially one-dimensional texture that takes us all the way from the deep purple up to the bright red, and that's our color code for whatever it is we're looking at, in this case rainfall. So that's going to be the next step, is drawing that overlay. Now, immediately this sort of set off alarm bells in my head, because I thought, well, you've just overwritten a huge number of pixels. Because all of this area, and this is especially important when you're looking at some of the other rainfalls, in areas of the world where it rains more, all of these areas are actually not being blended at all. They're simply replacing pixels that were there. But yeah, that's not a huge deal. And in fact, it's not anywhere close to being the most expensive thing that this view does. But if you want to save a few cycles on your GPU, you may want to remember draw front to back. Now, you'll have one objection if you're the author of this program. You'll probably tell me that I can't draw front to back because I'm blending, and that is true. That does introduce some issues. But you could actually eliminate a lot of overdraw by perhaps stenciling out the areas that have rainfall or have data on them. But as I said, a really minor point, and the only reason I really bring it up is because there's a lot of apps that have significantly more overdraw than this and still draw everything back to front, and that's a real problem. You want to draw front to back so that you can take advantage of Z rejection. Now, here's step 3. It's a little hard to see what they've done here, but step 3 is actually drawing the tiny little dot that tells me where I am, and step 4 puts a little white square inside that dot. I don't know if you can see that or not. So anyway, not a big deal. Where is the performance loss coming from? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say performance loss? I also said that this map draws really fast. Yes, it does. But how long does it take to draw? 17 milliseconds. That's good enough to mostly keep us at 60 FPS on a very fast device, which is what I tested this on. It was a Nexus 7. On a slower device, or one that doesn't have as much memory bandwidth, or one that just has a different performance characteristics, you're going to run a lot slower. 17 milliseconds is really on the edge. It's actually just a little less than 60 FPS, but that's the highest frame time that I saw. So, what is eating up all the time? Well, it's not actually the GPU. Now, you don't see it in this view because you have to run systrace to see it, but the GPU overhead on this is just 3 to 4 milliseconds, which isn't bad for something that's drawing this many pixels. Now, what's really eating up all the time is this over here, one draw call, 17 milliseconds. Okay, that's just one call, and it's not even the one that touches the most pixels. This is the call to draw the overlay. So, what is it doing wrong? Well, the real problem is that it's not just excuse me. It's not just drawing these vertices, it's also mem copying them, and that's really where things get heavy. So there's actually 2 arrays here that are being set up, all right? And then they're being drawn using this GLDraw elements call. One of them is apparently, if you look at the contents, probably the weather information itself. It's a bunch of integers, they kind of cluster in odd ways. That's probably our weather information. That's going to vary per frame. Maybe not enough to justify redoing it every frame, but yeah. But the next one, which is even larger, is a bunch of floats that are probably never going to vary because these are all the vertices that go into this mesh. And there's no real reason to change those ever. Even if you're zooming the map in and out, you can just change the projection on those. So why are we sending them every frame? There's no reason. Those should go in a vertex buffer object. So I think we'll go ahead and sum up now. There's nothing wrong with this app, but it's skirting the edge of going from buttery to janky. And with just a few very, very slight changes, it could be far into buttery territory. All right, let's go ahead and take a closer look at today's apps, talk about our next steps.
Yeah, that's right. So we're going to see how close they all are to being pure Android. And to do that, we're going to pass them through each of these checklists. So we can already see that there's a little bit of work needs to be done on a few of these apps. We haven't had a chance yet to look at them on tablets. So I'm hoping there's a great tablet experience, particularly for WeatherBomb, which looks like it could be a really great immersive sort of weather exploration tool.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to go through and have a look at how each of those things go. And then I'm going to use my mind to change the slide. Until then, you can find our Pure Android collection at bit.ly/pureandroid, and you can nominate your apps for consideration by adding it to our Trello page. You can find that by searching for App Clinic Trello. We're going to be back next week looking at kid mode apps, which I think is a topic of particular interest for yourself.
Indeed, I will be showing lots of cute pictures of my baby daughter. But tune in anyway, because we'll also be covering apps and some interesting things that you need to keep in mind when you're developing apps for children, especially kid mode lock screens.
Absolutely. So tune in for that, and also tune in next Tuesday for Android Design in Action.
And until next week, we are the eye in the sky,
Looking at you.
and we can read your mind.
See you all next week.